Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Light in the Lamp podcast. This is going to be our first regular season kind of analysis sort of episode. I'm here with my good buddy Steve,
Hello.
as always. And later on in the episode, I'm also going to cut in a phone interview I did with a good friend of both of ours. His name is Pete. He's a huge Devils fan. We kind of talked about the New Jersey Devils and their start to the year. So I guess that's a good place to start. So here we have a little phone interview with a good buddy of mine. This is Pete. Say hi to the folks, Pete.
How you doing, everybody?
He's a huge Devils fan. Obviously, me being an Islanders fan and Steve being a Rangers fan, we do get to see the Devils a fair bit, but I try to also watch as much hockey as I can. Pete watches pretty much almost every single game of the Devils, so he's going to give us some insight that maybe I hadn't picked up on. So let's just jump into it. So the first question I kind of want to ask you here, the team starts not 0-6. I think there were, 0-4-2 overtime losses.
Yeah. Well, all right. It's still 8 games in now, actually.
Right, they've won 2 in a row.
Two, which is very good. We'll get back to that in a minute, but it was a very rocky start, to say the least, for the Devils. So, opening day, you get there feeling really good. You have a 5-1 lead, and you blow it and lose it in overtime. And that game, I feel like that third period of that game really set the tone for everything else that followed over the next week. Because then the next day they went to Buffalo and got blown out. And then you had another set of back-to-back games later on that week where you lost both of them. And another one of those was an overtime loss where you blew a 4-1 lead. And it was just, it was a comedy of errors that led them to start the season 0-4-2. But then they played the Rangers the other night, last Thursday, to get the first win of the season. That, of course, with the rivalry there, the Devils and the Rangers now reignited between Kakko and Hughes, and just the fact that the teams never liked each other to begin with, that was a really big pivoting point, I think, for the Devils players, the coaching, the fans especially, getting reinvested into this team. And then a shutout win on Saturday, 1-0 over a 4-2 Vancouver team. Things starting to turn around and get back to where they should be.
So let me ask you this, because you did point out that 2 of those losses came when the Devils had big leads, a 4-goal lead and a 3-goal lead. Does the team's inability, again, in context it's still early, but what are you seeing on the ice that's leading to these leads being lost? Is it not enough team toughness? Is it not a guy that's willing to throw a hit and settle down the game? Like, what are you thinking is leading to these struggles to hold these big leads?
And, Rob, that's an interesting question, because it's almost as if it's a continuation of where they've been the past couple of years. It's not just new to this year, but over the past couple of years, they have a really hard time finishing off the end of the period, and it just, and then also in the third period, just not playing strong. It seems like they're burnt out by the time the third period comes around. But that was really more the story for the past 2 years. I think this year is a little bit different in the sense that these players are still trying to learn how to play with each other. I mean, keep in mind all the new pieces that you've added to this team. Obviously, with Hughes here, Gusev is now here, PK, Wayne Simmons. It's a lot of new lines that have never played with each other, and it's a lot of learning how to interact on the ice, how to talk on the ice, what each player's style is going to be like. And I think that's a lot of what's going on here, because John Hines is changing up the lines pretty much for every game so far, except for the last 2. And it's a real learning process, because it's almost half of the new team that's starting this year.
Okay, so I do want to talk about John Hines for a second, because it was very, very interesting when the Devils are hosting the New York Rangers. Down comes the assistant GM from the office. Now, assistant GMs on the bench is really, it's a rare thing to see. Usually only we'll see it when the coach gets fired halfway through the season and they don't have a replacement. They'll send down either the GM or the assistant GM. You saw Bob Murray do that in Anaheim last year. But it's even rare for an assistant GM to be on the bench less than 10 games into the season. I have an opinion on that. I want to get your opinion. What do you read into that? Are you afraid for John Hines' job, or what do you think's going on in the office there?
Okay, so what happened was last Monday when the Devils blew I think it was a 4-0 lead at one point over Florida. They were hosting the Panthers. Toward the end of the game, a lot of the crowd was chanting, "Fire John Hines." And I personally think a lot of what happened with having the assistant GM come down is a publicity stunt for the Devils and for Devils fans to keep them happy and keep them quiet. Now, as it turns out, the Devils ended up winning that game, which was, I'm hoping it's the first of many wins for them this year, in a pretty victorious fashion over the Rangers, 5-2. But I think a lot of that was just to give Devils fans a peace of mind, like, we're listening, we're going to take some type of action. But at the end of the day, it really is just a publicity stunt. I don't think it's been too much of anything. It might have also put a little bit of a flame under the players' butt to play with a little bit more hustle, because on no level is what they did up to that point acceptable.
Right.
So it could be a combination of those two things. But I don't think John Hines is going anywhere. They just signed him toward the end of last year to a 3-year extension to his contract, worth a lot of money. So I think he's secure in Jersey for at least this season, if not more.
So,
and
yeah.
frankly, no, go ahead.
No, you can finish your thought. I do have a thought that I want to put in, but I want to hear what you have to say about the coach. Do you like John Hines?
Sure. I have mixed feelings about John Hines. I mean, he did take us to the playoffs for the first time since we had the Stanley Cup run with Steve DeBoer. And I think he's really good with the development of the young guys, and he lets the leadership factor come in with the older players. He definitely allows for that to happen. But at the same time, he doesn't ever show emotion about anything. He doesn't show emotion on the bench. He's not that loud during practice. Now, I do know for sure that actually did change quite a bit with that Rangers game. All of a sudden, after that loss to the Panthers last Monday, during practice, he started getting very animated, very loud. He started showing some emotion on the bench, and it's almost like over the past 2 games we've seen the new John Hines that we hadn't. So, personally, I don't dislike him, but I think that I don't know. I'm kind of mixed feelings about him. I know that the players, they all talk about how much they do like John Hines and they like playing for him. So I know that as far as with the team, he really has a lot of respect from the players. But it's hard sometimes as a fan to watch an emotionless coach when you just give up a 4-goal lead.
Yeah, so I can speak to that as well. Under the Jack Capuano years, where you'd win 8-2 and you'd lose 6-1, and it's the same kind of response you're getting from the coach. But we got to play hard, we got to play smart, we got to raise the battles in the corner. So I know where you're coming from that standpoint. The way I see the whole assistant GM thing, I see it as twofold. I do agree with you. I think it's a little bit of, hey guys, hey fans, let's calm down a little bit. It's 10 games in. It's not even 10 games in. We're a very new team. And it's not like they just added depth pieces. They've added significant leaders, a top 2 defenseman, an arguable top 6 forward in Jack Hughes, a really serviceable middle 6 winger in Wayne Simmons. These aren't like fourth line guys that are only playing 8 minutes a night. PK Subban's, been playing 20 so minutes a night. He's going to see the power play. He's going to see the penalty kill. I do like the idea of the assistant GM saying, hey guys, let's settle down a little bit. But I also see this as upper management saying, hey, this team has expectations, and we have expectations to be a winning hockey club. And we have expectations that we're going to be pushing for the playoffs. We're going to be pushing for that wild card or that divisional spot. And I also see this as a GM's way of saying that they're satisfied with what they've done. The general manager is satisfied with the team he's put on the ice. He's saying, look, this team is talented enough to be winning, and it's not a talent issue. We don't have a player issue. Maybe it's a coaching thing. Maybe there's something going on in the bench that he's not liking. But I think both of those, in context, are positive things. The fact that the GM wants to be winning this early shows you that he's not folding in the towel this year, and he's not going to accept a bottom 5 finish. And I think that's important for your general manager to be that confident in your hockey team, even less than 10 games in. That shows that he wants to establish a winning culture right off the bat, and that's a very positive thing for a very young Devils team.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. And to add to that, I think by Ray Shero is so pushing to make sure that the wins are happening, and they're happening now, is because Taylor Hall made it very clear. He wants to stay in Jersey, but it's also playoffs or bust for him. So if we're not winning and it's trade deadline time, we're losing Taylor Hall. We're going to trade him because, people are already starting to speculate trading him for, like 3 or 4 big other name players. But let's be real, if you're a Devils fan, you want the MVP 2 years ago. Yes, he got hurt last year in most of the season, and he's not off to a super hot start right now, but even so, you want Taylor Hall. And Ray Shero wants Taylor Hall, and so does every other player in that locker room. Now, a big part of getting PK Subban this year was Taylor Hall. The two of them are best friends off the ice. So on an emotional level, that's a big player, I'm sure, even if, money talks, yeah. But also getting Jack Hughes is big because Taylor Hall and Jack Hughes work out together in the summers, or at least there have been times where they have. And I think a lot of the win now mentality is centered around Taylor Hall saying playoffs or bust. And there's no reason for this Devils team not to make the playoffs with the amount of talent that they have. Another thing that I think really killed the Devils early with some of these wins that they should have had, especially the first game. Corey Schneider got hurt in the second period at the very end, and Mackenzie Blackwood had to go in. Now, Blackwood's gotten both of our wins so far to this point, but he went into the third period and finished the second period absolutely cold off the bench. So, you don't expect to play an opening day game. That's a lot of pressure to just walk in to fill in a warmed up, mentally prepared Corey Schneider's shoes.
Yeah, it's very tough.
Winnipeg Jets.
Very tough.
So, anyway, back to the Taylor Hall thing. I think it's crucial that I made that point. I think it's very crucial that the Devils start winning and they keep winning now to get the mindset clear of all the players about what has already happened and just keep moving forward. It's an 82 game season. You can't win a Stanley Cup in October, but you can definitely lose one.
That's a very good point. It's you want to get off to those hot starts. You don't want to bury yourself early on in the season. I do want to ask you about Taylor Hall, and about this whole situation. Coming from an Islanders fan who 2 years ago we saw an all-out blitz. I mean, they were sending the linemen, they were sending the deep backs, the cornerbacks for an all-out blitz to try to catch John Tavares and keep him on the island. We had a new GM, we had a new coach. They were working on the Belmont Arena project, hand over fist to try to keep him there, and it didn't work. Does it give you any sort of confidence to see that upper management is buying into the team, not at the last minute? They're still in the first quarter here.
No, I'm fully convinced that upper management's kind of doing everything that they need to do right now. Luckily, the Devils don't have the same issues that the Islanders do with moving places still up into the Prudential Center, I think, until 2033. So they're not going anywhere anytime soon. And as far as with what they're doing with building the team, I'm not concerned at all. As far as I'm concerned, the Devils should be buyers at the trade deadline. It's so early in the season. They did just win 2 in a row, including getting the first shutout against the 4-2 Vancouver Canucks team. And now this, not to jump ship and change gears here, but it really bothers me the way that the schedule has been laid out for them. They've already played 8 games. They just played on Saturday. They don't play again until next Friday. And this isn't the first time where they're going to have one of those week-long type of breaks. I know every team has to have at least one. I think the Devils might have a couple. That means that when they do play, the games are so stacked together, there's not a lot of time for rest. And any momentum that they've now built, I'm hoping doesn't get lost by the time that they show up to the ice to play Arizona on Friday.
I do want to ask you about, okay, so that's a good point, and the Rangers, are suffering from the same kind of, other teams had been playing game 8, and they were playing game 3. And this this all sort of wraps back to another question I had, and something that you brought up. Game 1, Corey Schneider goes down. It turned out to be a cramping problem. Now, cramping problems will crop up usually early in the season for veteran guys whose bodies haven't caught up yet, and late in the season for guys when the wear and tear is catching up to them over an 82-game season. And you pointed out Mackenzie Blackwood. Does it worry you at all that it's game 1 and Schneider is struggling with his? It wasn't an injury, but he had to be pulled out. Does that bother you at all?
Yeah, bother me isn't the right word. Concern is really the right word. Yeah, naturally I'm concerned. I do think that Mackenzie Blackwood does have the potential to be the goalie of the future for the franchise. Schneider has 1 more year left after this year on his contract. Don't know that we re-sign him, and if we do, I don't know that he's in the starting role. Mackenzie Blackwood's only, I think, if I'm not mistaken, only 22 years old. And he stopped every shot on Saturday, and he only allowed 2 against the Rangers. He's got potential, but yes, I am concerned about Corey Schneider, especially for the amount of money that we're paying for him. Apparently, he does have a history of cramping. This was a big problem for him during his college days, but we haven't seen any of that since he's come here from Vancouver a couple of years ago. So I don't really know what to think of it. In the worst-case scenario, yeah, Mackenzie Blackwood comes in, but you don't want to have another situation where he comes in mid-game and you give up another 4 goals because he's not warm.
Now, I do want to ask you, I want to ask you about the new players on the team, but one last point about the goaltending, because this is the biggest reason that I put them just barely out of the playoffs was the goaltending. Do you think if we see the team, say, 30 to 40 games and still on that cusp, still maybe 2 or 3 points out of a playoff spot, could you see them moving Schneider to a team that's willing to eat cap and buying into a different goaltender, or do you think that they're going to ride out Schneider and Blackwood and give Blackwood the reins in 2 to 3 years?
That's a great question. I think, well, I don't even know what to think about that. I never really gave that much thought. Of course, we lost Kincaid last year at the Blue Jackets, and what's weird, just real quick about them, they're actually riding 3 goalies on the bench this year. That is such a strange thing. So if you have a chance, take a look at that. But, yeah, no, Corey Schneider, I suppose they wouldn't be opposed to moving him, especially with only 1 year left. But it's going to be hard to find. A team that's willing to pay that amount of money for him for a year and a half. It's interesting, and yeah, I do think Mackenzie Blackwood is probably going to be the face of the goalies moving forward in the next couple of years, unless they trade for somebody. But I don't know that the Devils would even want to trade for another goalie. If they traded at the deadline, if they're a cusp team, they're probably saying, Blackwood, you're playing the rest of the season in goal. We'll call up whoever we have in the AHL system from Binghamton to be our backup goalie, and we'll get another skater, like a power forward or something, or even just some depth on the fourth line to replace someone else down there.
Let me tease your brain about this one for a sec here, because this is a guy that I think will not be with his team come the end of next season, maybe even this season. Let me tease your brain on this one a little bit. Let's say the Devils are able to work out a team deal with a team that needs to eat cap. I don't think the Kings are going to be very close. I don't think the Blue Jackets are going to be very close to the playoffs. Let's say these guys are selling. You move Schneider to one of these teams. How would you feel about a trade for a young guy, maybe a Pavel Zacha and a pick for a guy like Jonathan Quick from the LA Kings?
I mean, specifically Pavel Zacha, I think I want to keep him around as long as I can. He has a lot of potential. He was our first overall pick 2 years ago, in between the Heishier and actually, I think he was just before Heishier. I think he was the year before that. He's really starting to develop this year into one of our best players. He's got, I forgot how many. I think he might already have like 6 points this year with the Devils. And for the amount of goals that they've scored, that's actually not such a bad thing. But I wouldn't want to lose such an asset like Zacha. A draft pick, I don't mind. But I don't think that Jonathan Quick is necessarily our answer either. He's not as quick as he was, if you don't mind the pun. He's an older Jonathan Quick. And I think, you know, with what we have with Blackwood and Schneider, it might be better than losing Zacha and getting a Jonathan Quick.
Okay, I would tend to agree unless the team is really in a win now spot where they're dominating the division. I would be okay with staying pat. So let's run down. I do want to talk about the new guys, specifically
Sure.
Jack Hughes and PK Subban. Kind of give me. Let's start off with PK. We'll get to Jack because he's a bigger story. No, I mean they're both big stories, but
Okay.
he's the biggest name. What do you like from Subban? What do you not like from Subban?
Subban is... It's hard to pick out things that you don't like about him. But let's just start with the fact that he comes to the rink every day with this mindset of we're going to win. And very positive, very influential, especially on the young guys. So to have... And this goes back to what I said earlier, him and Taylor Hall being the friends that they are, the two of them are really doing a great job leading the veteran, being the veteran in the front house. You know, Andy Green, of course, is the captain right now, and you have people like Travis Aja that have been there for a while. But having PK Subban's experience there, especially to work with those younger defenders in a way that Andy Green might not really be able to do, is really terrific. You know, you're developing people like Will Butcher, who I think is going to be one of the top defensemen, especially for the Devils, will be a top-line defenseman for a while. And people like Sammy Vatanen helping them with their game. I think it's great having his presence there. He's playing well. I think the biggest thing for him, and really for the whole Devils on the defensive side, is the penalty kill has been awful to start the game. It was 50%. Going into the game where they played with the Rangers.
Yikes.
Since then, they've killed off every penalty that they've taken, but they've taken way too many penalties and not doing anything with it. Likewise, on the other side, I would like to see more from him on the power play. PK Subban is known for a really, really hard shot, obviously, from the point. One of the hardest in the game. And it would be nice to see him take more shots on the power play instead of everybody playing footsie, passing the puck around and not doing anything with it. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in hockey is to have the man advantage because you pass it around and you do nothing with it and you get complacent. I think he needs to step up there and start being the catalyst for that, for goal scoring. And we did start to see that with the Rangers game, and they scored their first power play goal of the year on Saturday, if you could believe that. They were, I think, 0-21 on the power play going into Saturday. And then they finally got their power play goal then. But, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing with PK.
Yeah, so he's definitely known for bringing that hype, that energy, and you know he's a wonderful human being with the charity work that he does. Nobody can deny
Absolutely.
that. and he brings an energy to the rink, and he brings an energy on the ice where he'll throw that big hit, he'll get in some guy's face, he'll settle down the game that way a little bit, and I think he's a huge asset to this Devils team, especially to the young guys like you pointed out. I personally picked him as a Norris candidate. I think he's going to have a bounce back season this year. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. And I agree. I think he brings a lot to this team, X factor wise. Now I do want to talk about Jack Hughes, and folks.
His first goal the other day.
He did have his first goal. It was a very nice shot. And I just want to say, folks, let's calm down a little bit on Jack Hughes and getting on his case. Not every single first overall pick comes into the league and lights it up. A guy like Nail Yakupov came into the league and he really struggled. Now Yakupov eventually flamed out. I don't think Jack Hughes is going to flame out, but Yakupov came into the league and he struggled. Even a top 5 pick, a guy like Ryan Strome, came into the league and he really, really struggled for a very long time with the New York Islanders. Sometimes it takes guys a bit to find their niche, and I think that's what we're seeing out of Jack Hughes. I think he's on the smaller end of forwards. I think he's getting used to the size and the speed of the NHL. And yeah, he's expected to put up points, and he's got his first goal the other day, but he doesn't have the 12 points in 6 games that everyone thought he was going to have. But I'm interested to get your take. Obviously, the scoring will come with time, but even outside of that, his skating, his puck handling, his vision, his decision-making, what are you seeing out of Hughes that you like? What are you seeing out of him that you wish he would improve on?
All right, so things that I like that he's, just from a fan perspective, he is the hype of the team right now. Everybody's excited to be there, and everyone's excited to be there for Jack Hughes. The 18-year-old still shows up, with his acting problems to the rink. I mean, this kid's young, but that's the thing that fans need to remember, that this kid is young, and he could be the future for the team. Yet, Nico Hischier, who just signed a 7-year extension a couple of days ago, he was the first overall pick too. And, it's going to take a while to develop to get there. He got his first assist on Thursday against the Rangers, and then he got his first goal the other day, squaring off against his brother Quinn Hughes on the Canucks. And his goal ended up being the only goal scored for both teams that day. It was a 1-0 shutout on Jack Hughes' goal. But I think really the key for him is to really stop trying to finesse. It's too early to be doing that. Stop trying to do all the spin moves and maneuvering, because in the NHL you're not going to get away with it the same way you can in the minors. You're not going to be able to skate around people the same way because the players are expecting it. And you have to know that wearing that number on your back, people are looking for you. You're the number 1 overall pick. They know what to expect. All the eyes have been on you the entire offseason. So I think the best thing for him is to really just try to slow down his game and focus more on the fundamentals. But, Nico Hischier, right, he was the first overall pick a couple years ago. Didn't have a terrific first season, but last season he put up right around 60 points. That's really good, and that went really far under the radar, too. Nico Hischier's only 20 years old. Jack Hughes might be the same type of way, especially if it's the same coaching staff and they're going to try to develop them the same way. It might not be a 25, 30 goal a year for Hughes. Of course, everyone would like it to be, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. You have to let the kids develop and play a little bit in the league and get some, get some muscle under their bodies and build up, get used to what the NHL play style is like.
Yeah, not everyone can be an Austin Matthews scoring 4 goals in his first game. Not everyone can be Connor McDavid breaking into the league with, however many points he put up his first year. And I do think Hughes is going to be good. I personally put him in my Calder conversation as a finalist. I just think I agree with you on a lot of those points. He needs to simplify the game. The NHL is not the same as juniors. You can't get away with all this fancy stuff you used to be able to. Guys are stronger. Guys are bigger. Guys are faster. Guys have been playing. If you think about in juniors, the most a guy could be really have been playing in juniors is 2 or 3 years before they age out. There are guys in the NHL that have been playing for 10 to 15 years. You know, they've seen a lot of stuff and they know what's coming. So I agree. I think getting back to those fundamentals will do wonders for Jack Hughes' game. So on that note, you know, it's been great having you. I want to ask you,
Thanks for having me.
open spot. What's one last thing you want to talk about with the New Jersey Devils? Anything at all? Hit me with it.
I think the best thing that they did was earlier this week re-signing Nico Hischier to a $6 million 7-year extension. His contract's up at the end of this year, his rookie contract. And like I just said before, he put up, I think, 60 or 61 points last year. We're going to have him, he's only 20 years old, until he's 27. So we're going to have him right at the beginning of the prime of his career. If he's already putting up 60 points as a 20-year-old, he's going to be doing even better in about 4 years when he's really, grown in the league. I'm really excited to have him. I hope we can re-sign Taylor Hall now. We definitely have the cap space. We just got to make it happen. And Ray Shero is a very smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He just brought in all these great names on the offseason, PK, Simmons, Gusev. Gusev, by the way, also off to a tremendous start. We're talking about some of the rookies. Gusev has got a lot of potential and a really smart head. Aside from that, I think that's all I got for now. But thank you for having me, and, more than happy to talk again sometime.
All right, before I let you go, how many points the Devils going to have this year, and where do they end up in the standings?
Oh, that's tough. You know what it is? The Metropolitan, in my opinion, is the most competitive division.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know. I'm going to put them... I think 5 of the teams from the Metropolitan make the playoffs. I think both wild card spots, as well as the top 3, obviously, are going to make it. I'll put them as either wild card 1 or Metropolitan 3. And we're going to shoot the ballpark 88 to 92 points. I don't really know. But I have really high expectations for them if they could keep the ball rolling.
All right, so that was my good buddy Pete on some New Jersey Devils talk. Pete, thank you for joining us. We will be sure to hit you up again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Anytime. We will be sure to hit you up again when we need to talk Devils, because I know that you love to watch this team, and I know that you love the sport. So that's it for my buddy Pete. We're going to continue on with the rest of the podcast back here with me and Steve. We're going to talk about a couple different things, but let's start in New Jersey. They start 0-4-2, including blowing, I think it was a 4-goal lead.
There's 2 4-goal leads in 3 games.
Yeah, which is unfathomable. The assistant GM has to come down and step on the bench. They've won 2 in a row as of late. What are you seeing out of the Devils? Because this is a team that a lot of people thought was gonna make noise this year, and it's still very early. But what are you seeing out of a team that only has 2 wins through their first 8 games?
Well, I think the big thing is like roster turnover, I guess, is a big thing, right? Like Taylor Hall comes back, you add Jack Hughes, you add Wayne Simmons, you add PK Subban, you lose again Schneider to injury almost immediately on the start of the year, which is literally what we talked about. Like that was what hinged on the Devils. We hinged our whole bet on the Devils' playoff chances with the fact that we weren't sure if Schneider could keep it together, and he hasn't. And I mean, to be fair, Mackenzie Blackwood has looked fine in his games. Like I don't think a lot of these games are his fault. Like it's not necessarily a goalie's fault when you blow 2 4-goal leads and melt down the way they did. I mean, they didn't get their first win of the season until they played the Rangers. And the Rangers played a decent game. They just had trouble scoring, which is fun, which is what I expected out of the team at this point. Like they're still not scoring, but whatever. But like that's another thing with the Devils. Like they're not getting scoring a lot from anybody whose name isn't Taylor Hall, really. I mean, the stats are here. Taylor Hall's got 6 points in 8 games, and Kyle Palmieri's the leading goal scorer with 3, and he's tied with Blake Coleman, who scored 2 in 1 game.
So I asked Pete about the blowing the leads part and the Corey Schneider part. So I do want to let's talk about Corey Schneider, because I think this one is a little more kind of cut and dry, but it is open for discussion. I asked him, I said, it was a cramping problem that took him out of the game, right?
Right.
And that's not a quote-unquote injury necessarily, But I said cramping usually happens in two scenarios. Usually it's the beginning of the season when the older guys' bodies haven't caught up yet, and it's late in the season when it's, game 60 to 82, guys' bodies are hurt, they've been banged up over the course of the year, start getting some cramping problems. I asked Pete, does it worry him at all that in game 1, the very first game of the season, Schneider's already having cramping problems and he's sending a cold Blackwood into the game to face a team that was already warmed up through basically 2 periods of hockey? What does it bother you or worry you at all that it's game 1 and Schneider's already cramping up?
I mean, yeah, it would worry me at all if any goaltender comes into game 1 and has to leave, and I don't think he's been in the game since. Actually, wait, no, that's not true. We have the stats here. They've pretty much split the games here. I mean, Schneider hasn't won any of them, and he's got an above 4 goals against average, so obviously not really cutting it, but yeah, it worries me considering his long track record of groin issues,
glass groin,
his groin, his knees, his hips, and this isn't I think the Devils finally have to accept the fact that the Corey Schneider they wasted Corey Schneider's best years by not being competitive. I mean, and it's not necessarily all their fault, right? They were hinging their bets on Ilya Kovalchuk, and Kovalchuk fucked them.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if you're swearing on this, but for lack of a better term, he screwed them over by retiring late into that offseason, and they never replaced his goal scoring, and now they went about it the right way. They bottomed out, and they started building from the end out. The trade for Taylor Hall really started, signified not the end of the rebuild, but the middle portion where we're getting the talent we need. I mean, and then they have good veterans like Andy Green and guys. They built a roster the right way, but in doing so, Corey Schneider was already 28, 29. He's now, I don't know, what is he, 32, I think.
So they basically bottomed out during his prime,
right.
Unfortunately. The timing
and the workload that they threw at him, the 70 plus games he was starting, the 60 games every year. That I think the high was close to 70. He was his body can't take it. It's not to sound like a weird analogy, but it's like Andrew Luck. After so many years, your body just can't take it anymore. And Andrew Luck's roughly, I think he's the same age. He's 31, 32. And Andrew Luck's got retired from professional football because his body couldn't take it. And you're seeing the signs of Corey Schneider with his body. It's just, and it's not a knock on him by any stretch. It's sometimes you just can't, you play so much hockey and there's so much stress you put on your body that you just can't do it.
And some guys are just injury prone. I mean, even a young guy like John Gibson's always hurt. He can't stay healthy to save his life either.
Well, the Ducks better hope he stays healthy because he's the only reason they're winning any of these games right now. The guy's got he's got an even. This is totally tangent, but he's got an even record. I think he's 4-4 to start the year with a 1.8 goals against average and a 9.3 save percentage.
And even that loss last night to the Flames was not his fault. He made 26 saves, I think, and they lost 2-1. So it's the team just didn't score. No, I agree. It worries me that Schneider's going down with an injury that is usually a longer term, over the course of the year kind of thing in game 1, where he's not up to snuff.
And I think it's even more worrying that the games he is in, he doesn't seem to look good.
He doesn't look comfortable. He looks like he's just...
It looks like he's fighting something. It's really what it is. I wonder if the cramping issue is more of an issue than the Devils are letting on, or he's letting on to the organization. I don't know. You've seen it before. Guys will nurse injuries, and then finally they'll be like, "I'm done." Kevin Shattenkirk in his first year in New York, right, blew his MCL up in training camp, but he's like, "I just signed this contract. I can't do it," and it essentially ruined his career in New York because he never recovered from the knee injury because he waited so long. He never lived up to expectations either, but that's different. That's neither here nor there. But you can hide something for as long as you want, but it becomes increasingly evident the less comfortable you get on the ice,
especially as a goalie.
Yeah, teams will pick up on that. If he's cramping up, he's got bad knees, or his groin is cramping up, and he can't move that well. Their teams are going to eat him alive, and so that's really his issue. But Blackwood's been a bright spot, I think, for the most part. He's played well. He's got a winning record, but I still think his goals against average has to come down. I mean, you're not going to get into the playoffs with a goalie carrying 3 goals against average.
So I asked Pete this, and I'm interested to get your take because I have my own opinion. Do you think if come 40, 50 games into the season, the Devils are sitting either in a playoff spot or 2-3 points out of a wild card, do you think you could see a Corey Schneider trade to a team that just is eating salad? Because Schneider only has this year and next year on his deal.
Right.
Do you think you could see a team take on that contract and the Devils make a move for a goalie? And if you do see that happening, who do you think could be a fit in New Jersey?
I mean, I think that I could see the Devils upgrading in net at some point, I mean, it's not even if they believe Mackenzie Blackwood might be their starter in the future. Like, if they think they can make a push for the playoffs, I don't see why they wouldn't make an upgrade for a younger goaltender. But I also don't think the Devils. I mean, Ray Shero is a smart GM. He was the GM of Pittsburgh for how many years? He went back-to-back Stanley Cup Finals with them, won one. So I really think like I don't know if he'd pull the trigger on something like that if he's still in the understanding and everyone else is in the understanding that this isn't the year, like that they're not a Stanley Cup contender. Like St. Louis pulled the trigger on Ryan Miller, right? But they did that in a year where they felt they could compete for a Stanley Cup, and like it ended up not working out because like a goaltender change in the middle of the season isn't exactly something you want to like deal with. But I mean,
Okay, I lied. He has 2 more years left on his deal
Yeah.
until 2021.
but I don't know any team that's really looking to eat that salary. I mean, like to eat the salary, and then I don't know what young goaltender they would take on in return, because like I only feel like I'm really not sure if there's any like young goaltenders who are out there that are like log jammed somewhere, you know?
Do you think this is the trade that I proposed? Do you think the Devils could move Schneider somewhere else and then maybe pick up a guy like Jonathan Quick out of LA?
I mean,
Do you think they'd be willing to do that?
I think, I mean, like, see, this is what we talked about again too. This is like post prime Jonathan Quick, so like it'd be easy to move him out of, not easy, but it'd be easier to move him out of LA because LA is not going to be competitive in the near future. That's just the truth. They're stuck with too many big contracts to too many aging players that they can't really get the cap relief they need. So I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't take on Jonathan Quick. I mean, again, you'd be taking on another injury-prone goaltender because Jonathan Quick's been in and out of the lineup the last couple of years with knee problems and hip problems. I don't know what they'd have to give up because LA can't eat the contract. Like they can't.
Schneider would have to go somewhere else.
Yeah, so it'd have to be like a 3-team deal. But like I don't know what the Devils could give up some young defensemen if they really wanted to. I mean, I
said one guy that they might be willing to move, given that they have, Hughes, Hischier, now Gusev, Igor Yakovlev's back down in the minors. I said Pavel Zacha might be the odd man out, and Pete was not about that. He said they want to keep Zacha.
Well, they just signed for that extension, but like I don't know. Zacha's relationship with the New Jersey Devils organization seems to be very, very rocky, because I don't think he developed the way they thought he was going to develop. He was a 9th overall pick, I think.
Yeah, he was top 10, I believe.
Yeah, and he was projected to be like a number 2, number 1 center in the NHL. And, I mean, granted, the kid's only 20. He's our age. He's 22. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's still young, so like he's still got time to grow. And some guy, I mean, like what was it, Mark Scheifele? Everyone thought Mark Scheifele was a bust, and now he's 25, 20. He's not even that old. I think he's 24 maybe, and he's one of the most dominant centers in the NHL. Some guys just take a little bit of time, like. So Zacha might be but he honestly might be the odd man out down the middle now because you still have Travis Zajac. He's 34, but he can still play bottom 6 minutes for you in that capacity, and no one's taking that contract on. And
well, you have your numbers 1 and 2, Hischier and Hughes,
and Hischier just on that huge contract, so he's not going anywhere. He's got 7 years, $7.5 million a year.
Yeah,
and Jack Hughes is going to be making something similar. So. That's your franchise. Like you have your 1A, 1B center,
and you have 2 great wingers in Palmieri, who's not he's 28, he's still in his prime, and you have Nikita Gusev, who was considered the best forward not in the NHL last year, and he's playing really well so far.
Right, and then if they manage to keep Taylor Hall,
well, that's the big thing.
That's a dynamite. That's a really dangerous top 6.
So here's the reason that I proposed the goalie trade is because Taylor Hall's contract is up this year, and 2 years ago with the New York Islanders, we saw an all-out blitz at the last second to try to bring John Tavares back. I mean, they sent the linebackers, they sent the deep men, the cornerback, they sent everybody to try to blitz this guy and get him back on the team. Lou Lamoriello comes in as GM, Barry Trotz comes in as coach, Mitch Korn comes in as goalie coach, and it wasn't enough. Tavares walks, he goes to the Toronto Maple Leafs. I like the idea of them bringing in PK Subban and Wayne Simmons so that it's not a last-minute thing. They're showing Taylor Hall, hey, we're making a commitment to being competitive. But that's the reason why I bring up the goaltender, because I think if this team misses the playoffs again, because the goaltending and the GM doesn't make a move to shore that up, I mean, you could realistically see Taylor Hall's 27. I mean, he's an NHL MVP. I mean, he's in his prime. He should be competing for a Stanley Cup right now.
He carried this Devils team into the playoffs that year.
Yeah, and that's why I bring up the goaltending, because it worries. If I was a Devils fan, I would be really, really worried if we're not, even if they make, say, a wild card. You could see an Artemi Panarin situation with the Blue Jackets where he says, look, wild card's not good enough. I don't want to be fighting until game 82 to make the playoffs every year. It would worry me as a Devils fan for that situation to come up. Does that worry you at all, that Taylor Hall might be walking away from this team at the end of the year?
I mean, yeah, because who are you going to replace him with? Not to sound like they have Jack Hughes and everything, but, like, you're not going to get those 85 to 90 points from the wing anymore. Because let's be honest, like, as good as Kyle Palmieri is, he's like a 30-goal scorer, tops out at like 60 points probably.
He's not going to hit the 40 to 45 that we know Taylor Hall could.
Right. And he's also not going to hit, like, he's not just going to have this. He also doesn't bring the game-breaking factor that Taylor Hall brings to the team. Taylor Hall, all he needs is one good rush and to win the game.
Well, teams aren't afraid of Kyle Palmieri.
And that's
teams
not a
are
knock on it.
afraid of Taylor Hall.
Well, it's not a knock on Palmieri either. Like, it's not like he's not a good hockey player, but like he doesn't bring the combination of high-end speed and skill that Taylor Hall does. Like, Taylor Hall went number 1 overall for a reason. Like,
he was an NHL MVP for a reason.
Exactly. Like, it's the thing with Artemi Panarin. Like, Artemi Panarin has a game-breaking factor. It's the combination of the speed and the skill that they bring. And if I was who's the GM over there now? Is it Ray Shero? I literally just said it. If I was Ray Shero, I'd be genuinely worried about not being able to retain my, NHL MVP caliber player. Because let's be honest, we know he can compete with some of the best in the NHL. He's one of the best players in the league. He's probably the best left winger in the league. Like, it's not even close. Well, it's not that it's not even close, but like it's.
And this is a big year for the Devils because they have their first, but they don't have their second or their third, and
this is a notoriously deep draft, from what I understand.
It would worry me if I'm the Devils that, yeah, we could, because I think, again, even if they squeak a playoff spot and they get like blasted in the first round, I don't think that's enough to convince a guy like Taylor Hall to stay.
I mean, like, it really is like the John Tavares situation, except for they didn't draft and develop the same way. It's not the same thing. Like, he's not the captain and all these other things, but like John Tavares, for lack of a better term, sat on an Islanders team that was content to sit down pat and just wait for something.
Year after year, just did.
Like, he didn't do anything to improve the team. Like, he just waited, and I never understood that, because there were teams there that could have competed, especially like following the emergence of like Brock Nelson and Anders Lee and Matthew Barzal. You're gonna tell me the Islanders with John Tavares and Matthew Barzal wouldn't be one of the most dynamic offensive teams in the league, backing up one of the most the stingiest defensive schemes in the league? Wouldn't be a Stanley Cup contender year after year with the goaltending they were getting. I mean, let's be honest, Varlamov's been subpar up to this point, but like Rice looks like Thomas Greiss, so that's fine. But like, you lose Taylor Hall, then
I mean, that's a huge step back.
Yeah, it's a huge step back, because then now you're putting it all on. You're essentially putting it all on Jack Hughes. You're expecting Jack Hughes to step in and be Taylor Hall.
And I want to talk to you about this. What are you seeing? Because look, let's slow down on the Hughes train for a second. He's young. There's only 8 games into the season. He's not having the Auston Matthews or Connor McDavid debut that everyone thought he might. Where, Auston Matthews comes into the league, scores 4 goals on his first, in his first game. What are you seeing out of Jack Hughes as far as not even just his points, but his vision, his playmaking? What are you seeing out of him?
It's the same thing with Capo Caco. Like, I think they're both adjusting to the NHL. Like, I think they're both NHL players. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But it's a big jump coming from, especially for Jack Hughes, coming from the National Team Development Program, where they were pretty much dumpstering teams for 8 points a night, when you have Cole Caulfield riding shotgun scoring 76 goals. It doesn't happen in the NHL. It just doesn't happen. He could be playing with Taylor Hall, and like some nights it's just not going to be there. And I think the biggest part of like right now, what's good for him about struggling now, especially with the Devils team that's struggling, is it lets him learn to ride the ups and downs of the NHL without getting really, really high or really, really low, because that's detrimental to anybody. Like, if you get too low and because you're not scoring, like,
Well, you could be the next Nail Yakupov.
Yeah.
You just flame out. You're mentally checked out of the league, and
You
you're
go
gone.
on, and nobody even know like, what even happened to him. He went to play in Europe, I think.
He's back in the KHL.
I don't think anybody's talking about him.
No,
So
he's
it's
not
like-
even significant in the KHL.
So like that's the, and I don't think it's gonna happen to Jack Hughes. I think Jack Hughes is way too talented, and like he's driven. His interviews are actually really funny because you can tell he's still a kid. Like he's an awkward 18-year-old because like dealing with the media because he's very quiet. He's very like hey, it's great to win games. Getting the first one out of the way is really nice. I mean, and no, he scores his first goal against his brother, not against his brother, but like against his brother's
team in a 1-0 win.
Yeah, he scores the game winner against Quinn, so that's nice. But I don't know. I think the points will come. I think it's just a matter of time. He's just got to adjust. I don't think like he looked a little out of place the first couple of games, but again, he was just adjusting to the speed of the NHL. And to be honest, I think that whole Devils team looked out of place those first couple of games. Nobody seemed to know what they were doing.
Well, that's the thing. So that's the reason when I asked Pete, like, what are you seeing out of this team that's allowing them to blow back-to-back 4-goal leads? He said that there's a lot of new pieces in place. There's a lot of moving parts that aren't quite connected yet. And it's not like they added some like fourth line banger who's only playing 9 minutes a night. They added a top 2 defenseman, a top 6 forward, another top 6 forward in Wayne Simmons. He said that there's a lot of pieces that aren't clicking yet. And my thoughts on Jack Hughes is that, look, he's a little bit undersized. I mean, he's 5'10", 170. He's 5'10", 170. That's a smaller forward in today's game.
He's a Patrick Kane type player. Patrick Kane's about the same size.
So it's going to take him a little bit to get used to playing against guys that are like 6'4". Because like when he's playing in the U18 or the National Team Development Program, he's playing against other kids.
And he's of comparable size.
Yeah, and most of the time, guys in those leagues have only really been playing for 2 to 3 years, not facing up against a defenseman who's a 10-year NHL veteran.
Right. I mean, he's not going as Drew Doughty in junior.
Right. So we are going to move on from the Devils, but I do want to ask you one more question, unless you have something else you want to bring up.
I just want to say, like, Jack Hughes, with the thing, like, and this was in the scouting reports coming to the draft too, is like being an undersized player. He wants to, I think there's something to prove how tough he is. There's some level of him wanting to like get in there and take the hits to make the play. But when you're not small, but when you're undersized like that, 5'10", like you really can't be taking those hits. And I think that's something else he's learning at the NHL level. Is like it's not like junior where you can roll the hit off. Like if a guy like
if a guy like Johnny Boychuk lines you up,
like if these guys know what they're doing. If they want to take you out of a play, they're going to take you out of a play. And you're not Connor McDavid, who's going to just skate past them at 75 miles an hour. You know what I mean?
without even trying.
Like, that's the difference too. Like Connor McDavid stepped into the league at 18, but Connor McDavid's first step was always more explosive than anybody else on the ice.
The minute he set foot on the NHL, he was the fastest player in the National Hockey League.
Right, and like Jack Hughes is fast. He's not Connor McDavid fast. So he's got to learn. He's got to learn to do stuff like that. Like Patrick Kane doesn't take hits, never has, still gets the puck. Like it's things like it's stuff he's gonna learn over the course of his career that I think will lend him to being a better player. His ceiling is still ridiculously high. He still has like 100-point ceiling easy. Not this year, obviously, as a rookie. Like that's just absurd. But I think he's still going to be the high-end number 1 center that the Devils thought he was going to be. Like there's nothing to show me that he's a bust.
So before we move on from New Jersey, I'm really, really interested to get your take on this because it's a very interesting situation. Game 7. The assistant GM has to come down and be on the bench with the New Jersey Devils against the Rangers. He was on the bench for their last game against the Vancouver Canucks. Assistant GMs coming down on a bench is kind of a rare thing. Usually you only really see it when a coach gets fired and they don't have a replacement yet. I know, Bob Murray did it in Anaheim. And it's even rarer for it to be less than 10 games into the season and the assistant GM being like, oh my God, like we got to get somebody down there. What do you think is going on in management? Do you see this as hey, maybe this John Hynes guy is not what we thought he was? Or do you see this as more of like hey, let's just kind of stabilize things? What do you think about assistant GM 7 games into the season already having to be on the bench?
I think this is like they're signaling to the team that like they're not willing to bottom out again. Like they don't want to get the number 1 overall pick again. Like they want to be competitive. And I think this isn't like necessarily a warning to John Hynes. I think the Devils believe in John Hynes. He's proven he can do it. I mean, he's taken some really subpar teams and made them somewhat competitive. I mean, his career record's like 500, but he's been coaching the Devils since, 2013 or something, when they were absolutely terrible. So that's not an indictment on him at all. If anything, it's actually proof that he can do it because he's taking a terrible team to 500 records. So that's whatever. But I think it really is a signal to the coaching staff that, like, hey, it's a shot across the bow. Like, we need to get a handle on this now. We can't wait to game 25 because if you're out of the playoff spot by Thanksgiving, generally the odds are you don't make the playoffs out of it because you cannot claw your way back in. There are exceptions. Obviously, the St. Louis Blues on New Year's Day being last place in the NHL. That's an exception to the rule.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very
generally,
often.
But if you're out of the playoffs or out of the playoff contention by Thanksgiving, you're not making the playoffs in April because the amount of points you have to make up just is too many. You have to hope for the teams in front of you to keep losing and you to keep winning. Like, it's not a winning formula. So I think if anything, this is a positive sign that, like, you can tell management is engaged and they care because, like, we need to get a handle on this because if we don't, then we really don't make the playoffs and then we really lose our shot at Taylor Hall. So I think a lot of it circles back to the Taylor Hall question, really. Is like they're trying to prove to Taylor Hall that they're committed and competitive.
It's funny because we've been friends for so long. I said pretty much the exact same thing. I said this is a positive sign from management saying, look, we've got the talent in the lineup. We should be winning games. Let's right this ship before this gets too out of hand. I pretty much said the exact same thing.
I also think it's some level of management being like, trying to, like, because you're so removed from the day-to-day operations of a hockey team that, like, I think this is management stepping in and being like, well, we want to understand what's happening at the ice level. Like, we want to know what's going on, player to player, coach to player, how this is functioning and where the dysfunction is. And I think that's, again, encouraging. It's important because, like,
it's showing that they're not just going to sit back and let it happen.
Yeah, they could just remove themselves entirely from the situation and just be like, I don't know, they're just not winning. But it's like they stepped in and, like, we need to understand why we're not winning. And again, it's not like an indictment on John Hines. I think this is encouraging John Hines because they're like, we believe in you enough for us to come down here and be like, we want to work out. Like, we want to know what you think and what's going wrong because stepping onto the bench in an assistant coach's role, like, they could have just moved him and been like, we're going to coach like Bob Murray did in Anaheim. But they're like, no, we believe in you. We just need to understand what's going on down here that's not working. And then we can figure out what's going on at the hockey operations end to make the moves or moves to get you the pieces that you think you need to be competitive. Is really what I think it is.
So, interesting times in New Jersey. They sit at 2 wins, 4 losses, 2 overtime losses. We're going to move on. We are going to talk about another team out west. But before we go out west, I want to get your take on one of the more interesting situations in the Eastern Conference. That being Florida Panthers' Sergei Bobrovsky. He has not putting up the stats that everyone thought he was going to put up with this team. He currently, I believe, has a losing record. Well, he has an even record. He's 2 wins, 2 losses, 2 overtime losses, 407 goals against, 872 save percentage. I have an opinion on what's going on. What do you think, and what are you seeing out of Bobrovsky in Florida that's leading this to be? And again, it's early; it's 6 starts, but you know, what are your take? What's your take?
I don't know if it's entirely on Bobrovsky here. I mean, like, there are some games obviously he hasn't looked as comfortable. It did in Columbus. It's a new team, new defensive structures. He's trying to get used to the team the same way the team's trying to get used to playing in front of him. But, like, let's be honest, like, the Florida Panthers have not looked great by any stretch. You know what I mean? To be carrying a goaltender with this 2-2-2 record, and I think their overall record is what? 2, so that's they're not doing 3-2-2 or something. Like, they're,
I believe they're somewhere. Let's see if we can just pull this up real quick. They are, where are our Florida Panthers? They're
3-2-3. So they're not lighting the league on fire in the way that everybody thought they were going to. I mean, I never thought they were going to light the league on fire by any stretch. I still think they're a playoff team. I still think they can be a wild card team, and I really think they can push for a divisional spot by the end of the year if they sort this out. They can't wait too long to figure it out. But I think if they manage to stay somewhat competitive until Christmas, they'll figure it out. Because usually by Christmas, teams have gotten used to playing under new coaches. Because let's not beat around the bush. They're playing. John Quenneville is not the same coach as Bob Bugner.
No.
So it's a whole different scenario, and I just think Sergei Bobrovsky needs a little bit of time to adjust. I don't think it's entirely his fault. That being said, he also hasn't been the 2-time Vezina Trophy winner that you expected him to be. Like, he doesn't look like 2-time Vezina Trophy winning Sergei Bobrovsky.
So I went back and I watched the games that he's played in so far, and there was a couple of things that I kind of picked up on. One is he looks small, which is weird because in Columbus he looked so big in the net. Like he was able to use his athleticism. He's not a big goalie, but he was able to use his athleticism to look big. And some of these goals that are going in, especially the ones that are beating him clean, he's making himself seem so small in the net. And I'm not really sure if that's a new goalie coach kind of situation where they're saying, "Hey, tighten up the arms, tighten up the holes." He's not challenging as much. He doesn't look like he trusts his defense as much. To your point, he's letting in a lot of rebound goals where he's not looking super comfortable at his direction. And that again, and obviously, in my opinion, rebound goals are almost never the goalie's fault. If he makes that initial save, that's all you can really ask for him. If the rebound goes in, that really should be the defense cleaning up, unless it's like an egregiously bad goal from like a really sharp angle. But he looks smaller. He looks like he doesn't trust his defense as much. And like you said, that might be a new system, and he just doesn't look comfortable yet. And he looks like he's trying to overcompensate at some points, trying to either over challenges or he's getting beat clean. He just does not look like he really belongs just yet. And
it's like, what is it, Ryan Miller in St. Louis. Ryan Miller went from playing behind the Buffalo Sabres, who were not a playoff team, not good, seeing like 35 plus shots a night, like every night, to going to St. Louis, who was one of the sounder defensive teams in the league, and he struggled because he wasn't used to not seeing that volume. He was used to seeing that volume of shots that he just, he wasn't comfortable.
He ruined my bracket that year. Thanks, guy.
So it's like he wasn't comfortable, and I think it's something similar to this. Like he went from a team that was so sound defensively for the most part in Columbus to Florida, which is a team that's, let's not be not sound mean, but isn't as sound defensively because again, new coaches, new systems. It's all that kind of things. It's I don't think. So I think with time he'll get more comfortable. I think that's only. And if he doesn't, then that's bad news Bears, especially because they signed him to 10 years.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the defense in Columbus was sporting two of the best defensemen in the game with Zach Werenski and Seth Jones, and the rest of the defensive core was
pretty solid. I mean,
they weren't slouches either, but I don't know. I mean, they have Aaron Ekblad, they have an aging Anton Stroman. I thought this defense was going to be better than they are. And to your point, some of the goals that have been going in have just been total defensive lapses. I mean, like shots right from the slot, which I mean, it sounds weird because we're used to seeing Bobrovsky save those, but the fact that they're going in isn't his fault. I don't know what to make of it. I just think he doesn't look comfortable yet. I expect, like you said, him to turn it around, but right now he just looks like he doesn't quite fit in here.
I mean, there were times in Columbus where he looked kind of out of place too. Like people were like, oh, is he done? Is he done? And then he'd light, catch fire, and he'd go be a supernova. He'd be hotter than anything in this, the universe. He'd run into the playoffs, and he'd go from being inconsistent in the December-January range to in April sweeping the President's Trophy winning Tampa Bay Lightning and making them look like they were the team in the wild card spot. So I think it's a matter of time. He's too good not to turn it around. That's really that's really what it is. He's just too good not to be this bad, and to continue to put up these lackluster efforts like he has.
So that's kind of our take here on Bobrovsky. Is there any other thing in the East you kind of want to talk about before we move out west?
I mean, every team is pretty much shaken out to be where I thought they would, except for Buffalo. I didn't think Buffalo would be winning the division at a 7-1-1 record right now, but their offense is on fire, and Carter Hutton looks really really good in net.
And your boy Victor Olofsson can't stop scoring power play goals.
Yeah, I know. He's the first player in history to score all of his goals in the power play.
He has 7 goals, and they're all in the power play right now.
I mean, the guy's a power play specialist. I don't know what to say. They're sporting a plus 13 goal differential. I think it might be the highest in the NHL right now. Their offense is on fire. The only team scoring more goals than them is Colorado, which is exactly what we thought was going to happen. Colorado's scoring tons and tons of goals. That's not a surprise. But yeah, that's really the only thing in the Eastern Conference is Buffalo managing to just outscore teams and just blow them out of the water. Jack Eichel looks really good. Jeff Skinner looks like the 40-goal scorer they signed Victor Olofsson came out of nowhere. He's playing well. I mean, Rasmus Dahlin is still one of the quietest number one defensemen in the NHL. Nobody's talking about him still, and the guy's still an animal.
I do want to talk about the Rangers, but we're going to wait on them because I think this team needs a little bit more time to gel. So maybe next week we'll hit them.
Okay.
Because I
considering they've only played 6 games,
their schedule has been terrible.
They played 3 games in 2 weeks, and then they played 3 games in 4 nights.
So we're gonna wait on the Rangers, but we will talk about them soon because I know you have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of opinions, but I do want to go out west, and there's one team. We can bounce around and talk about other teams, but there is one team specifically that I want to talk about because they had high hopes coming into this season, and they currently sit with a 2-7-1 record. Your Dallas Stars. We're going to get into some specifics, but general overview, what are you seeing out of Dallas? That's what's up with this record here?
They're just not scoring. I mean, you can see by the goal differential. What's his Ben Bishop's playing great, right? Ben Bishop looks like Ben Bishop. He's playing good hockey. He's honestly winning the games that they're winning. The only games they've won are because Ben Bishop's in the net. But they lost. I think Corey Perry played his first game with the team the other night. He put up 3 points.
He bounced into the lineup or something.
And I mean, but you haven't heard anything about Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Radulov, none of the Joe Pavelski even, none of these guys are factoring in at all. They are the worst offensive team in the NHL in terms of goals for per game. They're averaging a little above 2. The highest scoring team in the league is averaging 4.3. And that's a really big disparity. Even the teams that are in the top 15 are averaging 3 or more goals a game. The Los Angeles Kings, who are not going to be competitive this year, are averaging 3 even. This Dallas Stars team with Miro Heiskanen, John Klingberg, Joe Pavelski now, and their stars, their top line they've had in the past, Rupe Hintz, this is a team that, for all intents and purposes, should absolutely 125% be a Stanley Cup contender with the talent on the roster. And most nights they look like they have no idea what's going on. They look absolutely disjointed, and there's not a new coach. There's not really huge new pieces. It's not like the Devils who are adding 3 or 4 new pieces in big spots. They added 1 more top 6 winger, right? Which in theory is a big piece, but it's not really that big of a piece when you already got a core in place, and your decor is intact from last year. You still have Esa Lindell. You still have Steven Johns. You still have John Klingberg and Miro Heiskanen. Second-year Miro Heiskanen, who's now fully adjusted to the NHL Miro Heiskanen. I think you got to start worrying if you're a Dallas Stars fan because you're, 10 games in? 10 games in with only 2 wins in arguably the second-best division in hockey where we thought there were 6 teams that could make the playoffs in any given stretch. Even going to the Chicago Blackhawks, if we both said if they got hot, they could somehow squeak out a playoff spot. You really can't afford to lose 7 of your first 10 games. You can't afford to lose 7 of your first 10 games in any division, let alone the Central or the Metropolitan. That's just not good. And Corey Perry's played 3 games, has 3 points. Their leading scorer is Rupe Hintz. And that's not a knock on Rupe Hintz, but where's Jamie Benn? Where's Tyler Seguin? These guys aren't... Jamie Benn's got 1 goal through 10 games.
Tyler Seguin only has 2.
Yeah, exactly. Miro Heiskanen is outscoring both of them.
Yeah, it worries me because I really thought this was going to be a super competitive team. Joe Pavelski currently sitting at 1 goal as well. I think, clearly there's a goal-scoring issue here. And, to say... To your point, like you said, Ben Bishop sits at 2.58 and a 9.13. That's serviceable numbers. These should be winning hockey game numbers. But
I think they'd probably be lower if they were actually winning games. They weren't hemorrhaging goals the way they are and not scoring any.
And to your point, you can't sit back in this Central Division because the Avalanche are going to be a good team. The Jets, even though the Jets had a lot of issues coming into this season, they're currently in second place in the Central. The Predators are scoring 4 goals a game on average. This is not a division you can sit back and wait. No. And the other issue is, coming into this, is who do you move if you're making a trade? are you going to trade away a Rupe Hintz because you think, oh, he's hot as he's going to get right now. His value's never going to be higher. Let's move him out now. Do you trade a guy like maybe one of your defensemen to try to get a forward up front? There's.
Do you wait it out and see? And like waiting it out and seeing could be absolutely catastrophic for your season, because what if you don't figure it out till 25 games in?
If you go in, if you're 20 games in and you have, I would say, pretty much any less than 10 wins, I mean, that's a struggle.
Oh, yeah.
And for them to get 10 wins out of their first 20 games, they're 2-7-1 right now. They'd have to go 8-2 in their next 10. And it's not to say that they can't do it, but it really worries me because there's a lot of teams right now that are playing above their pay grade. I think right now the Oilers are playing above their pay grade. The Anaheim Ducks are certainly playing above their pay grade right now because their scoring is almost as bad as the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars have 21 goals through 10 games. The Anaheim Ducks have 23 through 9. It's just the difference is right now John Gibson's on another planet and he's just playing out of his mind. I think, the Canucks right now are really shocking a lot of people. They're sitting with a 5-3 record right now. I think there are teams that are playing above their pay grade that are going to make life very difficult for the Stars because they're taking points away that they probably should have.
I also think there are teams that are underachieving now that are going to get hot, and that's going to be more points they're going to lose out on. Like St. Louis at 3-2-3. St. Louis is a better team than that record shows. St. Louis gets hot. Those are games that you don't want to be playing. Chicago gets hot. That's going to be tough.
And if the Jets right now are sitting at 5-5, which is way better than they looked initially, what happens if they're a good team down the stretch?
Bufflin comes back, Josh Morrissey steps back in.
What's happening?
Heinola keeps playing the way he's playing. This is what's scary about it is Colorado's not going to slow down, and even if Colorado slows down and they're not scoring 4.3 goals a game, whatever they are anymore, they're still scary. That's still a scary team. That's a deeper team than they were last year. And last year, they really gave a lot of teams a run for their money. It's not an easy division. These aren't games you should be losing. They're really not. I'd be worried if I was the Dallas Stars right now.
It also worries me because really, we said at the beginning of the season the only team that didn't have a chance in this division to make the playoffs is the Wild, and the Wild have one less point through 2 less games. And again, I get it, guys. It's early. It's 10 games into the season, but you can easily lose a playoff spot by the end of November if you're not careful.
Exactly.
And it's confusing because on paper this is a good hockey team.
This is a team that should be scoring a lot of goals.
I picked them to go to the Stanley Cup final. I mean,
I got them pretty close. I had them in the Western Conference final, I think.
And you just look at it and you're sitting here and you're like, what is going on? And clearly the issue is goal scoring, but out of your top 6, I mean, you have Ben, Sagan, Hintz,
Radulov,
Pavelski. You have 5 guys that, I mean, you could move Pavelski down to the 3rd line if you wanted to, but then why did you even sign him in the first place? He's not he plays like he could play on the bottom 6, but he's probably too good to be doing so. And granted, he's got 1 goal through 10 games, but you can't what do? Do you move an Essa Lindell and give up a good defenseman to try to get a top 6 forward? I mean, it's. I'm not saying there's not room to improve, but especially in today's NHL, where realistically speaking, I mean, there's only about a handful of teams that aren't playoff teams and know it right now. I would say the Senators know they're not a playoff team. The Kings know they're not a playoff team, and the Wild know they're not a playoff team. I think maybe the Red Wings know they're not a playoff team. There's really only 4 teams that right now are probably looking at the season and saying, yeah, this is okay for us to miss the playoffs. There's not a lot of room to negotiate there.
There's a lot of bubble teams. There's a lot of, this year more than any, I think, there's a lot of bubble teams. There's Vancouver, the Rangers, the Devils, and they all improved markedly. They're all better teams, much better teams this year than they were last year. Artemi Panarin, Jacob Trouba, going to the Rangers. The Devils get Jack Hughes, PK Subban. Even in their own division,
the
Colorado,
Flyers basically get an entire new defensive lineup.
Yeah, and even in their own division, Colorado got stronger. They added Nazem Kadri as a number 2. Tyson Jost scores the hat trick the other night. Nashville adds Matt Duchene. There's an arms race down the middle of the ice, and I thought Dallas was going to be deep down the middle, and like right now they're not showing it. They're really not. Like, they don't look that deep. They don't look scary either. Like, when you watch these games, they don't look like a threat most of the time.
No, they're very boring right now.
It's like, and they played one of the most best defensive hockey games in the league last year. They were one of the top teams defensively, and right now they're giving up some of the most goals in the Western Conference. Like, they're at 31. Like, I think the worst in their division is they gave up 33, and that's the worst in the conference. Everyone else has given up less than 30 goals for the most part in 10 games. Like, that's not... And they've played more games. They played 4 more games than Chicago, 2 more games in St. Louis, Nashville, and Colorado. Those are games in hand that you can't afford to lose in this division.
They haven't won at home yet.
No.
How are you 0-2-1 at home?
They're 2-5 on the road. Like, it's...
Really, the idea in the NHL is to win 60 to 75% of your home games and go even on the road.
Right. You don't want to be again, this is the analogy I made like a while back. I don't remember if it was on the podcast or it was just in conversation. But like, not everyone's going to be the 2014 New York Rangers who are road warriors winning 25 road games, 25 home games. Like, that doesn't happen. So if you can't win at home,
you're in trouble.
You're doomed almost, because you're playing half your games at home. If you can't afford to win at 20 to 25 of those games at home, you're banking on winning 30-something games on the road, and that's even worse. You're gonna tell me you're gonna walk into Toronto, like into Montreal, in February in the middle of a playoff hunt, and you're gonna guarantee yourself you're gonna bank on winning that game? I don't think so.
No.
If they're in the hunt and Carey Price is hot, no, absolutely not. 120%. And Montreal's already a hostile crowd as it is. It's only gonna get worse if they're competitive.
Well, road games aren't easy in Nashville. We know that. Road games are never easy in Chicago. Road games aren't easy in Colorado because of the air difference and the time.
Winnipeg's one of the loudest arena in the league just because it's the smallest.
Like, these are not, you're not going on the road against, no offense to the teams I'm about to name, you're not going on the road 3 times a year against the Arizona Coyotes or against the Florida Panthers, where it's
an empty
kind
rink.
of an easy arena to play against. You're going on the road to Smashville. You're going on the road to the Madhouse on Madison. Like, you're going on the road to tough buildings to play in.
Yeah, and even in the Western Conference, the games they're going to play in the Pacific Division aren't in easy barns. Like, Edmonton right now is not an easy place to play. They're red hot, and the fans...
They're 4-0 at home right now, the Oilers.
And their fans know it. Like,
the Ducks are 4-1 at home.
The Ducks, like, the Shark Tank is never easy to play in. Vegas, we've seen, is not easy to play in. Calgary, Vancouver. I mean, these are rabid fan bases, and these are teams that now, like, Vancouver 3-0 at home, Calgary 3-0-1 at home.
Even the Coyotes are 3-1 at home.
Yeah, like you said, Edmonton 4-0 at home. Like, those aren't, but like Chicago's 2-2-1 at home, but Colorado 4-0 at home. Nashville 3-1 at home. St. Louis is having trouble winning at home. That's worrying. But like, to not win a single game at home.
I mean, I get it. It's 3 games, but you're 0-2-1 at home, so really 0-3 at home. Like, that's gotta worry you a little bit.
I mean, the Rangers. What was it? I keep referencing the Rangers because these are like the stats I remember because I love the Rangers. But it was it Shattenkirk's first year with the team, or it was one of those like weird years right after those Cup teams, like those really competitive teams where they started to kind of slide. They had I think it was a 7-game homestand and went 2-5 and like I don't even know, it might have been like 3-2-1. It was some combination thereof where they didn't collect most of the points and they never really recovered. They ended up kind of limping their way into the playoffs at the end of the season because they had to go out and play a lot of road games late because you waste your opportunity to put up the points at home when your own barn should be the most dangerous place for teams to play you because that's your rink. You got to defend your rink, and if you're struggling to win at home, and late into the season, are you still gonna have trouble winning at home? That's a recipe for disaster.
And, not even thinking about the playoffs, but if you go to the playoffs, you're expected to win your home games.
Yeah, you're expected to at least split your home games.
You're not in trouble in the playoffs until you lose at home. And right now, the Stars, not winning a whole lot of games at all, not winning at home, I do want to talk about two more teams in the Pacific specifically. Let's just touch on one because it's not really a team view kind of situation. Your favorite guy in the Pacific Division, one of your favorite players in the National Hockey League, Martin Jones of the San Jose Sharks, has looked terrible this year.
The San Jose Sharks have looked terrible this year. Like, let's not beat around the bush. This is teams that are like, this is everyone at the beginning of the year, like Kevin Weeks and everybody in the NHL Network, not calling you out, but like whatever. Like, they're all like, hey, San Jose is one of the strongest teams in the division, strongest teams in the West, blah, blah, blah. They look exactly like we thought you and I said they were going to look. They're old, they're slow, and they're not getting the goaltending they were supposed to get. This is Martin Jones from the first 3 games of the playoffs. This is the Martin Jones we all saw. This is the Martin Jones that played most of last year. And people are still buying into this idea that, like, oh, he's great. He's one of the streakiest goaltenders in the National Hockey League. This is not an indictment on him as a player. He's obviously better at hockey player than I'll ever be. He's playing in the National Hockey League, and I'm sitting here. But, like just armchair commentary, like, he needs to be better. If they want any shot at winning their division or even getting into the playoffs, they need serviceable goaltending, and they're not getting it, like, at all.
And it's not even like, okay, guys, I get it. Hockey's not a sport. It's not like baseball, for example, where you can see a pitcher's ERA and be like, oh shit, like he let up 6 runs in the first inning, he got blown apart. Because baseball is like just one-on-one, man-man, right?
Right.
You can't look at a goalie's stats and be like, oh, he's got a 4 goals against average. What's wrong with him? Maybe it's the defense. But guys, it's not. I mean, I'm telling you, I watch
them, yeah.
I try to watch as much hockey as I can, and I understand that the 3 to 5 minute recaps that they put up that I watch don't tell the whole story. But you look, even the games that I've watched the whole games through, these goals are just not NHL goals.
He looks lost.
His 5-hole is gigantic, and that's it. He's getting beat 5-hole clean with no screen, no tips from the blue line. I mean, that can't happen. Those goals cannot go in. Those are backbreaking because now your defense is sitting there like, throwing their hands up, and you're like, what do I got to do? Block every single shot coming this guy's way?
I mean, it also takes the win. He's also has a habit of letting in bad goals at really inopportune times. Like, it's not like they're winning 7-0 and he lets in a clunker and you're like, yeah, whatever, shake it off, Martin, because like we're up 7 goals. Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, I coach a team of 15 to 16-year-olds, and we were winning a hockey game 7-0 the other night. We gave him 1 goal in the 3rd period, and I was like, whatever. Like, it's cool. It was a clunker. I didn't care. We were winning 7-0. Doesn't matter. When you're in a game, you're on a tight, checking, like, 3-2 hockey game, and he gives up a clunker to go down 4-2. You look at it, and you're like, what? Like, what do we have to do? And they're also not, like, they're not scoring. I don't think, like, there's a lot of problems in San Jose right now. Like, Martin Jones just doesn't look good, and that's it. The team doesn't look good, but Martin Jones especially doesn't look good. He's, like I said, streaky, and if you're gonna run with a streaky goaltender, this is the risk you're taking, because like he could be absolutely cold until December, and then all of a sudden get red hot, but you're already too far to the playoffs, so it doesn't matter. You could be like the Buffalo Sabres of 2011, 2012, who were cold into January, and then won like 25 games or something down the stretch and missed the playoff by 2 points.
Well, if you're gonna have a streaky goalie as your starter, you better be sure you have a backup that's gonna win you 15 to 20 games, and I don't think they have that right now in Aaron Dell. I think he's okay.
Aaron Dell is the type of backup goaltender you have on a team with an elite goaltender that you're paying like $12 million. Like, he'd be fine behind Carey Price, because Carey Price is gonna win like 35 games, and you'd be like, he'll pick up 10. Then you get your 45 wins, you get into the playoffs. I mean, they have Keith Kincaid, who's better than that. I think Keith Kincaid, if the situation was reversed, right, and Keith Kincaid had, for some reason, had signed in San Jose, and Aaron Dell ended up in Montreal, that'd be best case scenario for everyone, because Carey Price can play, Aaron Dell gets his 10 wins, whatever, nobody cares. They get the play, they make a playoff push. And in Keith Kincaid, they have a serviceable backup who can theoretically win you close to 20 games, to back up the fact that Martin Jones isn't gonna win you the games you think he needs you. Like, granted they played Vegas twice to start the year, and Vegas has looked really, really good, but that doesn't change the fact that San Jose has not looked good at all.
No, and I don't like what I'm seeing out of Jones, and I'm, as a guy that plays goaltender, I don't like riding the goalies, but he has been just
awful,
miserable. Speaking of goaltending, though, I know there was one other team you wanted to talk about in the Pacific. Your Pacific leading Edmonton Oilers sitting at 7-1-1. I want to start off the question with, are they for real? Is this a real legitimate contending playoff spot Edmonton Oilers team, or are we seeing a type of Buffalo Sabres from last year's team that's going to be first in the NHL through 30 games and then fall off the face of the planet?
They're not deep enough. They're gonna fade. They're a pinwheel. Their depth in the middle is unbelievable, right? It's so good. But you have James Neal, who I think is gonna be a 30-goal scorer. He's got that track record. He's playing alongside of Malkin. He proved he could score 40. So like the high end is probably 40 with him and McDavid, right? That's fine. That's acceptable. But like outside of that, it's like you're really gonna keep Zach Kassian in your top six. Like it'd be a different story if they had Jesse Puljujarvi playing, because I could be like, all right, well Jesse Puljujarvi might be the piece they're missing, but he's still in Finland. He's still not playing. Their goaltending is still really, really iffy to me with a 38 or 39-year-old Mike Smith. And yeah, I don't know how he has 6 points entirely because he's playing with Connor McDavid. Like that's really what it is. Like Connor McDavid is leading the NHL in points. Leon Draisaitl is chasing him by 1 point. James Neal has 9 goals. Oscar Klefbom also has 9 points. I mean, Nugent Hopkins got 6 points. That's for a second line center. That's pretty much where you want him to be.
That's all you're asking out of him. Yeah.
That's on pace for like a 60 to 70 point season. Like that's pretty nice. But my biggest thing in net is it's like you have a 39-year-old Mike Smith, right? Well past his prime. Still a good goaltender. Still a serviceable number 1 in the NHL, I think. He's big. He's still athletic. One of the best puck-playing goaltenders in the league. But the 9.3 save percentage and the sub-2 goals against average is not sustainable. And Mikko Koskinen, to be honest with you, I wouldn't trust Mikko Koskinen as far as I could throw him. Just because last year he did the same thing. He started hot, like red hot, got that contract from Peter Chiarelli, and then was just absolutely miserable through the middle stretch of the season. Absolutely terrible. So, he started 4 games, won all 4 of them. But that's not like this isn't a sustainable like roster. Like success isn't sustainable. Like they're just scoring a ton of goals. They're like I'm not gonna lie, they blew the Rangers out. They 4-1, they blew the Rangers apart. The Rangers look slow.
They blew my team. They blew the Islanders apart too.
So it's like and seeing them firsthand, like watching the game, it's like all right, Edmonton looks good, but it's like the thing that's looking good is like they're banking almost entirely on their goaltender standing on their head. And Connor McDavid being the best player in the NHL, which he is.
Well, okay, so, all right. I want the Oilers to be successful because I think McDavid deserves a chance.
I'm not saying this because I don't like the Oilers.
Right. I just want to get that out there for the Oilers fans. We're not hating on you guys because you're just mad because we blew the New York teams out. No, listen. I want to see McDavid in the playoffs. I would love to see McDavid. I
wanted them to play for the Western Conference Final that year with Cam Talbot. Like that was
an exciting hockey team. That was so much fun to watch.
I don't know what happened because the roster didn't really change in the next couple of years. They just weren't competitive all of a sudden.
But here's why I don't think this is sustainable. I agree with you. The depth is atrocious. I mean, once you really get past the first 2 lines, you're kind of like, who do we have? Oh, Patrick Russell and Riley Sheahan. Hey. I mean, Sheahan's a serviceable third liner, but then you look at like Gaten Haas and like, okay, like Alex Jason, who's like not okay. Really who we thought he was going to be. And it's like, then specifically you look at the defense. Once you get past, I mean, Adam Larson's on LTIR right now, but once you get past Darnell Nurse and Ethan Bear is playing really, really well, and then you get past Oscar Klefbom, I mean, it's Brandon Manning who's okay. Matt Benning is kind of okay. Chris Russell has looked like he doesn't know what hockey is right now, which is weird because he's a pretty good defenseman, but he kind of just
he was one of the league leaders in block shots for a long time. Like
he just looks like an absolute mess right now. The defense is not a defense that is gonna be. I mean, look, let's not pretend that Oscar Klefbom's gonna have an 82-point season. It's not happening. He's gonna peter out at 30 to 40, in my opinion. Darnell Nurse is the same thing. He's not really got that offensive touch. I mean, he's a big, hard-hitting defensive defenseman. Zach Kassian is not putting up 70 points. Okay? Could he do it just on the virtue of McDavid? Probably. I don't think it's going to continue, and I look at this 9 goals in 9 games for James Neal. I don't think he's going to hit 40 because he does this every year with his career. He plays alongside a really great center, and he hits 25 goals, 30 goals, which is good. But for a team that needs to score their way into the playoffs,
I just don't
you can't have a 25 goal scorer playing with a guy like Connor McDavid. And I agree with you. I don't think either of these goalies is going to be, especially because, look, maybe Mike Smith can pull this off early, and he looked great for Calgary. But as this year goes on, I don't see him being as good. And Mikko Koskinen, again, why they ever gave him that contract is beyond me.
After, 13 games in the NHL or something?
Horrible, awful GMing. And the Oilers are pretty good defensively. They're only giving up, I think they're the 20th in the league for shots against.
Let's not say, they got a new coach in Dave Tippett, who's known for, his strong defensive play and his defensive systems. But I don't think this is the New York Islanders of last year where, they bought into Barry Trotz's defense and managed to get into the league with stellar goaltending and, great defense. I think this is just, Connor McDavid and Draisaitl are red hot right now, and Mike Smith is also red hot, and they're just riding it. I mean, like you said, Ethan Bears looks good. I think Ethan Bear is a good defenseman. He's got 3 points in 9 games. He's got 2 goals. I think he's looked really good. I think he could stay. He looks like an NHLer. But losing Adam Larson hurts. Oscar Klefbom is not going to put up the 82 points like you said, and Darnell Nurse might top 50. Maybe.
I look at teams like the Boston Bruins and the Washington Capitals when I think of sustainable, because the Bruins top 6, not only do they put up a ton of points, but they're heavy hitters. They're going to grind you down over the course of the season. And I look at teams that are sustainable where they don't have to be super fancy to win. A team that can put its nose to the grindstone and grind out a 3-2 hockey game is the kind of team that's going to have success over the course of the year. Because when teams are super reliant on being super fancy, and that goes away, and they don't have those, as you said, meat and potatoes hockey players to back up the top 6, that's not sustainable. When the fancy pants, Deke Stangles and Snipes aren't coming through, you need a fourth line to go out there and bang out a hard fought goal. I don't think the Oilers have that, and that's part of why I don't think this is sustainable, because look, McDavid's going to get his 100 points. Absolutely. Draisaitl's probably going to hit 100 points again. But where's in a game like the other night where they lost 1-0 when McDavid and Draisaitl didn't do anything, where was the third line? Where was the fourth line chipping in for a goal? Where are you getting this depth goal scoring from? You look at the Islanders from last year. Okay, Matt Barzal only had 60 points or something like that, right?
After his 85-point rookie campaign, the difference is he bought into a defensive system.
But you still had a fourth line featuring a 20-goal scorer in Casey Zizegas. That's not going to happen again. But you had the fourth line to make up for those games where Barzal wasn't putting up 3 or 4 points. The Oilers do not have that.
No, absolutely not. And again, this is not a knock on the Edmonton Oilers. I think the Edmonton Oilers are the biggest conundrum in the NHL. I don't understand where they went wrong. They had how many? They had 3 first-round picks in a row. They had a roster at one point that included Taylor Hall, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. We're not going to talk about Nelly Yakupov, but I'm pretty sure Connor McDavid played with Taylor Hall for a season. And they just couldn't figure it out. They never had the goaltending. Then they get Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot has a great year for them, and then he doesn't replicate that success. Again, the team around him isn't great. But I'm gonna be real honest. I just don't understand what went wrong in Edmonton and where it went wrong, because I don't know how to right this ship. I really don't.
To right this ship, in my opinion, you got to fire both these goalies out of a cannon and buy into a goalie for more than 3 seasons and buy into a legitimate top 2 defenseman. They're riding so hard on
essentially playing 3 top 4 defensemen. They're essentially playing 3 number 2 defensemen in their number 1 holes. Klefbom, real serviceable number 2 guy. Darnell Nurse, great number 2 guy. Adam Larson, great number 2 guy. They don't have a PK Subban. They don't have a Quinn Hughes. They don't have a Drew Doughty. Like, they don't have that one guy that, like, they can count on the back end to win them a hockey game, you know?
And I know Oilers fans are going to come at me and say, oh, but you said the Leafs are going to win the Cup this year, and they're a similar kind of team where they're going to score their way into the playoffs.
But they're not, because the Toronto Maple Leafs have Frederik Andersen, who's a top 5 goaltender in the NHL, who is in his prime, who has proven year after year that he's consistent and can win those 35 games. And they also have a defense that boasts Morgan Rielly, elite number 1 defenseman. Elite number 1 defenseman. One of the best two-way hockey players in the league. Jake Muzzin, one of the best defenders in the league. Like, he's a good number 2, number 3 guy. Tyson Barrie, not great in his own end, but an elite number 2 defenseman. Who else is on there? There's Dermott. Dermott's another good defenseman. Like, and the Maple Leafs also have the depth down the middle. Frederick Gauthier. You know, they have depth down the middle. They have depth on the wings. Their top 6 is ridiculous, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, let's not go out there and say the Toronto Maple Leafs don't have a ridiculous top 6. Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, John Tavares. Like, that's absurd in today's NHL. This is a super team as far as I'm concerned. But Cody Ceci, Jake Muzzin, Morgan Rielly, Rasmus Sandin, Tyson Barrie, like, that's 5 guys that could all play good hockey in both ends of the ice. And again, Frederik Andersen. Frederik Andersen is the goaltender that Edmonton doesn't have. They have Mikko Koskinen or Mike Smith. This is Mike Smith 5-6 years ago. Different story. Mike Smith at 31, 32, competitive goaltender, might be able to carry them. 38-year-old Mike Smith, not really. Mikko Koskinen, dude flamed out in the NHL in the early 2000s and came back now as like a 30-something-year-old and gets a 4-year, $4 million a year contract. Peter Chiarelli. I don't know, but like,
see, my biggest thing with the Leafs is that they had Ilya Mikheyev, who comes in and he's been bouncing around but pretty consistently on a top 6 role. I know that they've also experimented with Andreas Johnsson in the top 6.
Nick Petan could theoretically move into a top 6 role.
Dmytro Timoshov's been playing in the top 6. But let's look at some of their depth players. You know, if you argue depth player for depth player, so, you know, they brought in as well Alexander Kerfoot, who's, you know, he's been okay. He's not been...
Well, Kerfoot, they didn't bring Kerfoot in to be one of the guys. They brought him, like, not like one of the guys, but one of the guys. You know what I mean? Like, he's not coming in to play with John Tavares. He's coming in to play on a third line with Nick Petan and put up like 30 points, and I think he's going to do it.
But if you look at third liner for third liner, so Kasperi Kapanen has been moved down to the third line, which is the perfect role for him because he's a real speedy turnover machine.
And he's a power play. You can play him on that power play and he still get his goals. Like
Nick Shore,
Nick
Petan, Trevor Moore is one of the best third line players in the NHL.
Frederick Gauthier.
Like, these are guys that if Matthews is having an off night, you can count on them to chip in and maybe get some offense. I don't see that on the Oilers, and we saw it the other night. I get it, it's one game that they got shut out, but there is no excuse for that Oilers team to be getting shut out, and they did, because if you lock down that top line, there's no scoring on those bottom six.
It's like the New York Rangers. Like the New York Rangers, we talked about them, and we'll talk about them probably more in depth next week after their schedule. They catch up to the rest of the teams, and we can actually have like a more sample size of the team outside. Because originally, the first time we talked, it was like they played 2 games, and the top line to put up, and Zibanejad had 8 points in 2 games, and the top line had like 20-something points. Like, they slowed down. Panarin's still scoring, but like if they don't do anything, the Rangers really don't do much. And that's the same situation in Edmonton. The difference with the Rangers and Edmonton is, this is the Rangers coming out of a rebuild. Edmonton's in their perpetual rebuild for the 10th year. This is something that's got to change. Like, the perception is different with the Rangers and Edmonton. Edmonton at some point has to compete. If they don't start competing with Connor McDavid, then there's something fundamentally wrong with the model of development in Edmonton.
But there's no excuse for having McDavid and Draisaitl as players. And I get it, the NHL's not a league where one guy wins the game, but there's no excuse for having Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, even Ryan Nugent-Hopkins,
Darnell Nurse,
and not being competitive.
And let's not beat in the bush. Like, Edmonton change GMs again. They got Ken Holland out of Detroit. Ken Holland's a Hall of Famer. He built one of the most competitive Detroit teams, one of the most competitive teams in NHL history, period. The longest playoff streak in professional North American sports, 25 straight years in the playoffs. Unheard of. I'm not saying he can't do it in Edmonton. That's not what I'm saying at all. But he inherited a team that is in some kind of who knows what that he didn't inherit in Detroit. In Detroit, he inherited a team that had Steve Yzerman, Brendan Shanahan, Nick Lidstrom,
Pavel Datsyuk.
Yeah, like he had the pieces. And he inherited a pretty decent roster here. Like he's got Connor McDavid. Like it's a simple thing. He's got the pieces, but the difference is there was no salary cap back then.
Yeah.
So he didn't have to worry about being hamstrung to the $81.5 million he can spend, considering you're shelling out $11.5 million of it to Connor McDavid, which again, he deserves. Best player in the NHL, bar none. I don't care what anyone says. Connor McDavid is the best player in the league. You just don't have an excuse, like, to not be... You don't even have an excuse to not even try to be competitive. You can't say we're going to wait this out, because you're going to wait until Connor McDavid's, 27 before you're competing? That's ridiculous. That's actually ridiculous. The guy's winning you hockey games on your own at between 18 and 21. He's younger than you and I. He's a couple months younger than us. He's 20. He only just recently turned 22. Like, you have, in theory, 13 years of competitive Connor McDavid, right? 22 to 35. You have 13 more years. But you don't have the time to wait. You can't wait 5 years or 6 years till he's 26, 27, 28, and he start competing, because he's not going to wait. This isn't the league where guys wait anymore. There's no, it's not that there's no loyalty, but he's not chasing money because he's got his money. He wants to win. And that's the drive where, he's not going to sit on a non-competitive team. He's on a team. Imagine Connor McDavid in Toronto. Connor McDavid anywhere else in the league. We hear about him all the time, but he'd be a sensation. And that's and he'd be on a team. He himself would put the Toronto Maple Leafs over the top.
And it sounds weird for us to be saying that he deserves a competitive team, because yes, right now they are sitting at 7-1-1. I get it, Oilers fans. I get it. You're winning the division right now.
But on paper, that team is not competitive.
But we're talking from a long-term sustainability point. And I got to be honest with you guys, even if they get into the playoffs, I don't look at that roster and say, yeah, that's a team that's going to go deep.
Depth wins in the playoffs. The two teams that competed for the Stanley Cup this year were the St. Louis Blues and the Boston Bruins. The Boston Bruins had Noel Acciari on their third line. They had Jake DeBrusk playing third line at some point. That's a deep team. The St. Louis Blues had 9 scoring forwards. That was a scary team. They were both deep. Even the teams they played, Carolina was pretty deep. They got far. They flamed out, but they were young. Whatever. The Western Conference, San Jose, as much as I hate to admit it, was a pretty deep team to get as far as they did. They were a little top-heavy, but they were better on their bottom 6 than a lot of other teams were. So it carried them into the Western Conference Final.
The perfect team to compare them to would be the Colorado Avalanche. Top-heavy teams win a series, deep teams win cups.
Right.
Colorado Avalanche got past the Flames just by outscoring them. Didn't get past the second round.
No. They had no chance. Not that they didn't have a chance, but it was going to be really hard for them. Because, again, the deeper you go in the playoffs, the better the teams are. That's just the reality of it. You don't win playoff rounds by being bad. You just don't.
You don't luck your way
into a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and
so that's the thing with Edmonton. If Edmonton stays hot like they are right now, say they carry that. Say they're like the Buffalo Sabres, right? They're after 30 games, they're first in the NHL. Okay. If they don't implode entirely like the Buffalo Sabres did, winning 10 of their next 30 games or something, going 10-25 or something ridiculous. Through the stretch, and say they go even, right, 15-15, that's still probably good enough in their division to get a divisional spot.
In the Pacific Division, yeah.
They'd still carry a divisional spot, but I just don't think this is a Stanley Cup team, and I don't think that'd be good for them fundamentally, because it'd be a farce. Would you, because then what do? Do you buy into the team that you think is making the playoffs, sell off pieces, or buy pieces at the deadline for young talent, and then where are you in 3 years? You're with a team that's older, because James Neal is not part of this long-term plan. Let's not kid anybody. James Neal is backside of his career. He's not... James Neal is, 33, 34? He's 32 years old. he's not in a long-term plan. It's not like Ryan Nugent Hopkins long-term plan. Connor McDavid long-term. Darnell Nurse long-term. There's no wingers to play with them in the long term. The winger that should be playing in their plan long term, Jesse Puljujarvi, doesn't even want to play in Edmonton because he's asking himself the same questions we are. Like, what is this team doing and where are they going?
They have Yamamoto, who's down in the minors, but I mean, look, you can put almost anybody alongside of McDavid and Draisaitl, and they're gonna win and score, or they're gonna score goals. But then where is the second line coming in? Who's playing with Nugent Hopkins?
I mean, think about how top heavy the team would be. So say Kailer Yamamoto comes into the NHL, right, and does exactly what they think he's going to be. High-end, top six forward. Slot him in with Draisaitl and McDavid. Okay. You have a top line there.
Who's playing with Nugent
You're going to play
Hopkins?
Zach Kassian with Nugent Hopkins? Absolutely not. This is where Jesse Puljujarvi is making a mistake. He'd be perfect. There is no team in the NHL with a hole at the wing bigger than the Edmonton Oilers. And Jesse Puljujarvi wants absolutely nothing to do with the franchise.
Because he feels disrespected and he feels like he wasn't. And granted, he wasn't putting up the numbers he should have, but he was also young and he felt like he wasn't being used right.
So there's a lot of friction there. I think Ken Holland will eventually work him over because Ken Holland has a habit he's not gonna blink. He's gonna play the game of chicken with him, and he's like, if you want to go to Europe, go to Europe. You're not gonna coerce me into signing a contract. It's not gonna be like Pavel Zacha in New Jersey, who kind of forced Ray Shiro's hand to sign the contract with those reports all coming out that he signed in the KHL, and then the next day he signed an NHL contract. It's not going to be like that. Ken Holland's never been that kind of general manager. He will stare you down, and he'll go over the brink. He has to if he has to.
Well, look at what Lou Lamoriello is doing with Josh Osang.
That's also mismanagement in my opinion, but that's different. He's not
just
backing down.
Yeah, is the point.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm not trying to walk on your point. I'm just saying that's a whole different story. But yeah, he's not backing down.
I agree.
But
I think Osang's being
that's
misused.
a good general manager though. He's like, no, this is what I see for the team. This is my vision for the team. I'm the one getting paid to do this. So
well, the more you give in to players, the longer it's going to hurt you. Because now all of a sudden your contracts start going up, and all of a sudden your length of extensions start going up.
Well, look at Buffalo. When you start having general managers cede powers to players, it becomes a kangaroo court. How many coaches has Buffalo had since the Jack Eichel era started? And I think finally they have a coach and a general manager who's just not gonna budge on it. They finally okay, no, listen, Jack, we get it, we like you, but you're not LeBron James. You don't get to trade. You don't get to trade away our team or make decisions the way that it. And I'm not saying that's what happened with Jack Eichel. Nobody really knows what happened in Buffalo, but let's be honest, it kind of looked like Jack Eichel was a coach killer for a minute.
The team, yeah.
And same thing with Edmonton. Edmonton's a coach killing franchise, city right now. Dallas Aikens, Todd McClellan. Who even knows?
And these guys aren't bums. These are good coaches.
Dallas Aikens went down to he took his lumps. He even said he learned in Edmonton that you can't change a culture overnight. And he went back and he's served his time in the AHL, came up with the Anaheim Ducks, and he's got the Anaheim Ducks playing great hockey. Granted, they have the best goaltender in the NHL right now. He's playing the best goaltender in the NHL, and John Gibson. Whether he's actually the best goalie in the league is all the way up to argument.
He's definitely top 5.
He's top 3 for me, easy.
Yeah, I agree. But I see, your point being that
he's taking a team that really shouldn't be competitive, and he's getting the most out of his players. He learned, and I think, I don't think Dave Tippett's a good coach. He took an Arizona team that wasn't very competitive and got them to a Western Conference final. He's a good coach, and I think he's the right coach for them right now because he's really going to preach defense, which is really important to the team because that's really the only way they're going to win. Right now they're scoring a lot of goals, but if they want to go anywhere, they really got to tighten up and play a good team defense and just be stingy. Because you're getting your points from McDavid. You're getting your points from Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins, but you don't know where the rest of those goals are coming from, so you really can't give up that many. And that being said, I don't see the Edmonton Oilers winning a lot of 2-1 hockey games. I just don't.
No.
Their goaltending just doesn't lend confidence to the idea that they're going to win those 2-1 games. Like you said, the Bruins. The Bruins, in a cold night in January, will absolutely grind out a 2-1 hockey game and win. Because they're deep, and their lines will chip in, and their goaltending is above average. Edmonton's goaltending,
on paper, is terrible. I'm sorry, on paper, it's miserable.
I like Mike Smith, don't get me wrong. I've always liked Mike Smith, but Mikko Koskinen, I wouldn't trust him. And if you're planning on splitting those two, because let's be honest, Mike Smith at 38 is not going to be able to take on that workload of 65 games a season. It just isn't fair to expect him to. It just isn't.
He's played a lot of hockey.
Yeah, and he's played on a lot of he's played on a lot of teams that aren't very competitive.
So he's seeing a
Arizona.
lot of shots.
Yeah, his body, like he played on a terrible Tampa Bay Lightning team back like after their Stanley Cup final, their Eastern Conference final run in 2011. Played for a terrible Arizona team for a long time. Played for a couple. He went to, I don't even know where he went after that. He went to Calgary. He was good for Calgary. Calgary was a solid defensive team. Goes to Edmonton. Edmonton's really not a great defensive team.
No.
Like they haven't been in a long time. Mikko Koskinen again absolutely implodes in the second half last year after being as good as he is and getting that contract. Like,
And the sad part is they're locked in him because he has NTC. So if he doesn't want to go anywhere, he's not going.
Anywhere. I don't know. Like,
you have to buy him out. That's your only option.
really like they really got bullied there. They got bullied into giving that contract. Peter Chiarelli is the single worst thing to happen to the Edmonton Oilers in the last 10 years.
Yeah, he really.
Like, if they were getting mismanaged before that, whatever. It was neglectful. Like, it wasn't like it was just incompetence at that point. Like, it wasn't like they were actively making bad decisions. They just didn't know what they were doing. He actively made destructive decisions to the franchise that are going to handicap them for years.
Well, Eberle for Strome, Hall for Larson, and Larson's good, but he's not Taylor Hall.
No.
It just.
I mean, that trade for me to made sense on paper because they needed the defenseman, and Adam Larson came in and played really well for them, and Taylor Hall went out to New Jersey. They needed the scoring winger. They needed to fill seats. Taylor Hall fills seats.
It just shouldn't have been 1-for-1.
But Ryan Strome for Jordan Eberle. Let's not be on the bush. Ryan Eberle didn't live up to the expectations that they thought he was going to. He wasn't the 35, 40 goal scorer they thought he was going to be. He's still a top six forward.
And
Ryan Strome's like
40 to 60 points.
Yeah. I mean, he had a great end of the season for the Rangers last year, but that's because he got an opportunity to play on a large role on a team that didn't have anybody else. He looked absolutely lost as a second line center to start this year with the Rangers. He got 1 point, and it was on Capo Caco's first goal, and it was entirely because it's Capo Caco. He just gave him the puck and he did everything else. But yeah, I don't know. Edmonton's in a real iffy spot.
It's tough for them. So. Is there anything you want to kind of talk about last minute before we wrap up?
I think that's it. I think we'll touch on. There are a couple teams I want to touch on when they start to you start to see more of a trend develop. Like the Rangers, I want to talk about next, in a couple weeks when the schedule regulates, and then I'm trying to think who else is in the standings.
I do want to talk about the Rangers soon. I do want to talk about the Hurricanes soon.
I'd also like to talk about Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh's got a lot of really interesting injury issues right now that I want to see how they work out so far. Because they not only do they lose Evgeny Malkin to long-term injury reserve, they lose Nick Bjugstad to long-term injury reserve. So there are a lot of guys playing out of their pay grade there, and they're still winning games. I mean, they're blowing teams out too. They're winning 7-2. They won 2 games in a row, 7-2. So that's the team I want to talk about. Washington's looked good, but we both said Washington was going to be good. You know what we should talk about real quick? John Carlson is tied for the NHL lead in
points.
The
best defenseman of all time, John Carlson.
He's tied with Connor McDavid for 17 points, number 1 overall in the NHL. The last defenseman to win an Art Ross trophy, I'm pretty sure, was Bobby Orr.
And it's not even like, he's getting lucky. He's getting secondary assists. Like, he's making plays. Like, the passes that he's been making, especially in a power play, the passes that he's been making, he's looking so patient. He's so confident right now. He's not just throwing passes to Ovechkin blindly anymore.
Still, arguably, one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL. He flies under everyone's radar. John Carlson was was probably their best player, like the best player on that Cup run, like all around. Him and Evgeny Kuznetsov, in my opinion, were the 2 best players on that team when they won that Stanley Cup. He was the best player for them last year down the stretch. He's been their best player to start this season, and he's not old. Like, he's 28, I think now, 29. So it's not like he's gonna slow down anytime soon. So he's only getting better, and that bodes well for Washington. But it's just like out of nowhere, the guy's leading the NHL in points. Like, I knew he was good. Don't get me wrong. I never thought he'd be bad.
Like I said, it's not as if he's just blindly throwing passes.
No,
to
he's
Ovechkin.
making plays.
He looks like he's so confident with the puck. He's holding it more. He's finding the open guys. He's just making the smart plays right now. He looks so good.
He is a goal-scoring threat in himself. He's making their power play even more lethal than it ever was. Yeah, you had the play to Ovechkin that he scored on every single time. But now you have to worry about John Carlson as a shooting threat too. And you have to worry about John Carlson as a passing threat. You have to worry about John Carlson as pretty much the main threat on that power play because he's the quarterback. He took Nick Backstrom's job from him pretty much. Because now they're running the power play from the point as opposed to the half wall like they used to. And that gives them so many options. That power play is lethal. Kuznetsov, Backstrom, John Carlson, and Alexander Ovechkin is scary on the ice. And TJ Oshie in the bumper spot.
And then even if one of those guys isn't playing, you throw Tom Wilson in front of the net for the screen or the deflection. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's been an absolute joy to watch him as of late, just because every time he touches the puck, it looks like he knows exactly the play he wants to make. It's not like, oh, he's kind of just getting lucky. He looks like he knows what play he wants to make when he's in his defensive zone.
Before he gets the puck.
That's how good his vision is right now.
Before he even touches the puck, he knows what he's doing, going to do with it next. Like, he looks unbelievable. He looks so good. And I'm really excited because I've always liked John Carlson. Like, I've always thought he's underrated, and now it's like he's finally making a name for himself, so I'm happy to see that. I mean, the Rangers played those Capitals teams for like a long time in the playoffs, and we always got to see John Carlson every year, and he only ever got better. Like, he's a perfect new age defenseman. He's big, can move the puck, he can skate. He's tough in his own end. Like, he's just, yeah, that I just wanted to touch on that because 18 points in 10 games is absurd for a defenseman. The only person with more points, or even close to as many points, is Connor
McDavid,
the best player in the NHL.
Yeah, it's.
I think he's honestly keeps it up. He wins the Norris Trophy this year. That's my
I could 100% see him being in that conversation, and I probably should have put him in that conversation because I mean we've always known he's a good defenseman.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. It's
because like you said, he just flies under the radar.
He's just good. He just quietly goes about his business. He's not flashy. He's not crazy. He doesn't do any of those crazy things that Dmitry Orlov does, like between his legs, backhands. But he's a better player than Dmitry Orlov is. He's a more solid, competent player, and he's making some of the nicest plays on the ice. Period.
So be happy, Capitals fans. Go ahead and be angry at both of us Oilers fans, but yeah, so maybe next week a couple of teams we wanted to talk about, maybe the Rangers, maybe the Hurricanes. I want to talk about the Hurricanes again in context of are they sustainable. Maybe we can kind of follow up on some other teams if they start shifting around. Of course, things will come up during the week, but be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys for watching. I want to thank our buddy Pete for giving us the insight on the Devils. As always, Steve and I will be back next week with some more hockey content. So look forward to that next week.
Goodbye.